Hello, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are on this beautiful planet of ours. Welcome to Sustainability in Your Ear, the podcast conversation about accelerating the transition to a sustainable, carbon neutral society. And I'm your host, Mitch Ratcliffe. Thanks for joining the conversation today. It's going to be a good one. We've got a guest returning. The global construction and infrastructure industries are at a pivotal moment. As trade dynamics shift and tariffs reshape supply chains, companies are being forced to rethink how they source materials, balance costs, and integrate sustainable solutions. And at the heart of this transformation is a push for greener, more resilient construction materials. And I'm pleased to welcome back to the show Grant Quasha, CEO of Ecomaterial Technologies. Ecomaterials is at the forefront of decarbonizing the cement industry. Since his last appearance in October 2023, Grant's company has made major strides, including securing an $800 million green term loan facility, a move that will significantly accelerate the development and adoption of low carbon cement alternatives. With goals to double production to 20 million tons per year, Grant and his team are working to redefine how we build the world around us. And their concrete is about 80% less carbon intensive than the concrete that we've been using, which accounts for 6% of global annual CO2 emissions. So we're going to dig into how Ecomaterials Technologies is navigating economic uncertainty, evolving trade policies, and the urgent need for a domestic supply chain resilience in concrete. We'll also discuss the broader implications of those tariffs on sustainable construction, the role of green innovation in shaping the industry's future, and how businesses and policymakers can work together to drive long-term change. You can learn more about Ecomaterial Technologies at ecomaterials.com, and that is one word, no space, no dash. We'll get to the conversation right after this brief commercial break. Welcome back to the show, Grant. How you doing today?
I'm doing well, Mitch. Thanks for having me again.
You're making a lot of interesting moves, and I want to talk about a lot of them. But first, can you remind everybody what pozzolanic cement, invented by the Romans, does compared to the traditional Portland cement we use in most of the construction that we do?
Certainly. So, traditional Portland cement was invented about 200 years ago and is a very industrial process that has a lot of emissions associated with it. It's a very effective and efficient way to make concrete. It's the glue that makes concrete. Pozzolanic cement, essentially, what we do and what others do and the Romans did, is reduces the amount of Portland cement that you need in your mixture. And instead, you put in pozzolanic-based materials like coal ash, like volcanic ash. And those materials have three real benefits when you put them into the mix. The first benefit is they make the concrete stronger and last longer. The second one is that they have virtually no emissions associated with them. When you produce a ton of Portland cement, you basically emit about a ton of CO2. When you produce a ton of ash, you emit very little CO2, if sometimes none at all. And that there's a
Oh,
cost advantage as well.
the other thing about this is you can use industrial byproducts like fly ash, which could even mean that we could clean up industrial sites and make low carbon cement. I mean, are you finding more sources of those materials?
Absolutely. So you hit on it. There's a double environmental benefit, right? Which is not only are you reducing the emissions that you would have in the creation of the concrete, you're in many cases helping clean up former waste sites. And so, as we sort of mentioned in our previous conversation, there's about 2 billion tons of landfilled coal ash in the United States. And it's a potential problem. A lot of those are in unlined landfills.
Mhm.
And coal ash is fantastic when you put it in concrete. It's not so great when it's just lying in heaps on the ground and in ponds. So, by cleaning those up, we're able to really help local communities and improve the environmental footprint of concrete that we need for our infrastructure.
So, how much does pozzolanic cement reduce the carbon emissions associated in general? And can you kind of paint a picture of how far you think we can take just the construction industry just based on using this kind of cement towards a net zero goal?
Sure. So traditionally, pozzolanic materials like fly ash have been used around 20 to 25% in the mixtures with cement for concrete, right? So decent levels, but not the largest ingredient. What we and others are working on is how do we take that 20 to 25% and come up with, on the one hand, more of those materials, because overall today in the US, we're more at like 15% on average, right? We should get that at least back up to 20-25%. And
Mhm.
then once we get there, how do we increase that to 50, 75, closer to 100%? And, we have products that can go all the way to 100%.
Mhm.
Today the market is still not really in a position where it necessarily needs or is willing to pay for those types of products.
Mhm.
But frankly, the white space for us is really two-tiered. The products that we sell today that are cost competitive or less expensive than traditional materials are at that 20-25% level, which we need to get to for full stop first. And then our 50% products are cost competitive as well. So to my mind, the lowest hanging fruit is getting to that 50%, and then we can push beyond that, and that's the next stage. But right now, we've got the materials, we've got the technology. That 50+% is very, very achievable.
Now, last time we talked, you also were just starting to work with various local concrete production facilities. How many are you working with now? And what's your goal for, say, the end of 2025 in terms of geographic coverage in the United States?
Sure. So, we've expanded, the number of folks we're selling our products to. So now we're up to we have about 6,000 unique customers in the concrete space in about 46 states, which is great. We're national. We're looking to expand. My goal is to have us in all 50 major metropolitan areas in the US within the next couple of years. We're opening up some exciting new locations. We're having a ceremony next month for our first big facility in New York, which will be in Long Island City. That's a market that traditionally hasn't had access to our types of materials, and we're going to be bringing them in, and folks are really excited about that. And then on top of that, we are growing our advanced manufacturing and harvesting facilities pretty significantly. So this year, we just opened up our newest facility, harvesting material in Northwest Florida. We have a new natural pozzolan green cement facility opening up in the next couple months in Oregon. And then later this year, we've got another ash harvesting facility in Georgia and one in Alabama that will be opening.
A lot of progress. Now, you just closed recently in February an $800 million green term loan facility. How's that going to accelerate your progress?
Yeah, that was a great process. I'm always cheered when we go to the market and talk to folks about our business because, it's a quirky one. It's a little nichey, but when people do the work around it, they realize, it's an amazing one in the fact that we have such big impact as far as decarbonization, but we can actually still make money, which is great, right? So obviously people are loaning us money. They want to make sure they're going to get paid back. And we went into the market to raise more money to fund more growth, more of those projects like I described. And the market was very receptive. We were heavily oversubscribed. We probably had $3 billion worth of orders. And we were able to raise more money and lower our interest rate and term out our debt for another 7 years. So we've basically got a facility we don't have to touch for the next 7 years. It's a little bit over 7% in our interest costs, which is great for a company of our size, and was really a nice validation in the progress that we've made and the growth that we've been able to achieve.
What's really impressive is you're doing this, not to make a pun, but organically. This is growing out of demand for low carbon concrete,
Mhm.
and doubling production to like 20 million tons per year is really ambitious. Do you need support from policymakers, for instance, with mandates for low carbon construction, or is this just going to happen on its own?
A lot of it can happen on its own. Honestly, we've obviously had a change in administrations, and a lot of folks, would say to me, "Oh, are you really concerned about this change in administrations? There's less of a focus on decarbonization, et cetera, et cetera." And I say, actually, not particularly. The previous administration, you know, really wanted to push, decarbonization of infrastructure, but honestly, the federal government has not so many levers as you would think. It's
Hmm.
really state-based
Yeah.
on what happens. And so that hasn't really changed that much. I don't think there's going to be a lot of monies for like the IRA, et cetera, going forward for the next 4 years. But there may actually be a silver lining in the fact that, the previous administration, while very focused on pushing, obviously a greener agenda, when it came to coal ash, they were a little bit scared, right? Because you hear coal ash, you hear coal. And if you hear coal
Yeah.
and you're a very green focused, then oh, I can't have anything to do with that, and obviously we have to take the time to say, listen, we're not burning the coal. We're cleaning up what was, made before, and we're actually turning what was a problem into a solution. And so the newer administration, to be honest, and you saw this with some of what they may do with the EPA. I think they're going to act on a lot of these coal ash regulations to make it a lot easier to harvest and beneficially use a lot of these waste stockpiles. So I honestly think that if it happens, will have a really positive impact, because there are some vagaries around the rulemaking in the EPA
Yeah.
today that actually, when we go in to try and harvest ash, we kind of have one hand tied behind our back. And it'd be
Mhm.
great to, be able to do that, a lot more effectively.
There's two facets of how the Trump administration talks about the climate that I want to ask about. One is they kind of put a stink on it, and certainly they ban the word or the phrase climate change in their communication. But does that also potentially put you at a disadvantage when you're bidding on a project? Do you have to change the language that you use, the way that people are talking about changing their DEI language?
I don't think we really changed the language we use. What I would say is that, our business and our products have so many positive attributes.
Mhm.
We shift sometimes to what attributes we're going to highlight, right? So
Okay.
one of the attributes, several of the attributes that we have that is, I think, very appealing to this administration is that we're a domestic producer. We are
Mhm.
building domestic manufacturing facilities. We're hiring people for jobs. We are helping clean up the coal industry and make it more sustainable. Those are really positive things, especially in an environment where the incremental cementitious material in the market, other than what we're creating now with these new harvesting projects, is imported, right? It's imported cement or steel slag that's coming from China. It's coming from
Yeah.
Turkey. It's coming from all over the world, right? And that is not, with obviously all the tariff stuff going on, those international supply chains we don't think are as robust, as environmentally beneficial, or beneficial to the U.S. manufacturing sector than our domestic supply chains, which are much more resilient and frankly, fit into America first. Whether or not that's something that you really are harping on, it just happens to be the situation that we're in. So, and we
Yeah.
don't need a green premium. We sell competitively, right? And so we can sell a greener product at a better price. And so there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to succeed.
It's interesting you bring the green premium up because it seems, at least it was fading. Does that motivate states to put regulations in place requiring lower carbon construction materials? Or at this point, is it just a wash? There's no need for stimulus.
It depends. I think, there are a couple of states, specifically California,
Mhm.
who are going to take this opportunity to likely redouble their efforts to mandate more of these materials. And I think that's positive for us and others in the industry. It doesn't have to happen, but it is positive. So, we're supportive of that when it's done correctly. Obviously, like with any regulation, sometimes there can be pitfalls in the way that it's enacted versus the way that the industry really works. And so sometimes good to be careful about that. But, in general, I think states are going to keep pushing. I think the other big change in the market in the last 6, 12 months is data centers. It's interesting. I was looking at a chart the other day, and it shows on one line traditional office buildings and how much are being constructed. On the other line, data centers, and my hands are converging here.
Going through the roof, yeah.
Right. And basically, one of my colleagues was joking to me, when you look at the chart, data centers are almost catching where traditional office is, because traditional office is going down, data centers skyrocketing. He says this is when we realize that, we're making more homes for computer or offices for computers than we are making offices for humans, right? This is when the computers won. But the point is that those are very concrete intensive. And the Magnificent Seven, yeah, they may have walked back from a lot of their DEI initiatives and their ESG initiatives, but they're still really focused on limiting the impact of these facilities. And the best way to do that is to use more SCMs like ours, like coal ash. So there's been a big push for usage of these materials in those construction projects.
It's really encouraging to hear, and there's a lot to dig into in this, but we need to take a quick commercial break. We're going to be right back. Now let's get back to the conversation with Grant Quasha. He's CEO of the low carbon concrete supplier Eco Materials Technology, and he is saying a lot of really interesting things about the impact of the Trump administration. And I want to dig a little past Trump and what they're doing to overall global trade tensions that are a result of these tariffs that we're talking about. Do you see tariffs on construction materials being a barrier to your growth or an opportunity for you to grow? Could you, for instance, could you license your technology into another country?
Absolutely. So, as we kind of covered a bit earlier, tariffs can be challenging in a number of ways, but as a domestic producer in an industry that has a lot of imported material, tariffs are actually beneficial for us in the US.
Mhm.
And we think further highlight this resilience of a domestic supply chain that also helps clean up communities. So, we think that that can be a positive thing. That said, I don't know where all this is going to shake out. And I don't think anybody knows where all this is going to shake out. On the international side, you're absolutely right. We have started to do some more work thinking about how do we effectively roll out some more of this technology into other parts of the world where it is, we think very beneficial. The good or the bad thing about coal ash is that it's everywhere.
Yeah.
And so we have the ability to go to Poland, to go to South Africa, to go to Korea, and to do what we're doing here, there. Now, to an extent, there are others that are doing similar type stuff to what we're doing in other national locations. However, our higher technology, our green cement products, those types of things, those are things where we can go in either, we're an American company. We're likely to remain mostly focused here. It's not going to be a build, own, and operate strategy likely in the international space. Like you
Mhm.
said, it's probably more of a joint venture or a licensing type situation where we find a partner who can really benefit from our technology and know-how, and we work together to try to expand that. And I just hit a couple of the markets that I think could be good. One of the other markets that's super interesting is obviously complicated today is Ukraine. Hopefully, at some point, there's a cessation in hostilities there. They have a huge amount of coal ash, and they have a huge amount of infrastructure to rebuild. So that could be an interesting opportunity.
Let's talk a little about concrete production is a local thing, but supplementary cementatious materials, I got to take the time to say that right, is something that is made and then distributed to these local production facilities. Can you talk about how local this business really is, and will it continue to be more local, or are we globalizing in some sense?
50 years ago at the start of the industry, when one of our first predecessor companies in the late 1960s, a company called Dayton Fly Ash, started moving fly ash, it was extremely local, right? And it stayed extremely local, for a long, long time, right? The value of the material was so low that it didn't make sense to move it around. Now, for all the reasons that we've talked about, the value of the material is higher, and logistics have become somewhat more efficient. And so folks like ourselves have invested massively in logistics infrastructure to move this stuff and take it from a local to a regional and almost a national and international space now. So whereas, today we ship, hundreds of thousands of tons from the Midwest, from Illinois to California, right? That's almost
Mhm.
2,000 miles, right? And we make that work economically for ourselves and our partners. So, that is not the most efficient way to use these materials, right? The most efficient way is to serve the local market first,
Yeah.
but oftentimes the local market is saturated, right? And you need options to move out further. And so with efficient rail, which is one of the amazing things that our country has that people don't necessarily always realize, we have an amazing rail system and we have an amazing river system. We use barges as well, super efficient ways. And you need to be efficient because you can't FedEx this stuff and put it in a plane, right? That, and then the third piece is the international seaborne market.
Mhm.
People are importing ash into and SCMs into the U.S. The majority of the supply of granulated blast furnace steel slag, which is a competing SCM, we don't produce any of it, but think of fly ash coming from a coal plant to steel slag coming from a big steel furnace, right?
Right.
We don't have a lot of these big steel furnaces anymore in the US, but there's lots of them in Asia. And so they're sending a lot of this steel slag, which acts a lot like fly ash as a supplementary cementitious material. And it's international trade and it's growing significantly. Now, it's mostly going to coastal areas, southern Florida, Houston Ship Channel, parts of the
Mhm.
West Coast. But it's definitely it's turning into a lot more of a globalized trade.
Concrete is the second most used human material after water, which is an astonishing thought when you when you stop and think about
Yeah.
it. The
Yeah, no, and the statistic that I love is that every year we pour 30 billion tons of concrete. So that
Mhm.
means for every man, woman, and child, you're pouring like 4 tons of concrete. That's 8,000 pounds per person. It's an astoundingly large amount, and it really speaks to the fact that it's one of those industries that people don't tend to think a lot about, but once you do think about it, it's everywhere.
It gives a different meaning to the word infrastructure for sure.
Yes.
So thinking about that, how do you get architects and the folks who are designing highways and freeways and data centers to engage with the idea of using low carbon concrete?
Yep.
Are you integrating with their planning tools, for instance, making it available in their building information management system so that they can project the potential savings?
That is something that we continue to work on. I think it starts with the state departments of transportation because they tend to act as the first sort of good housekeeping seal of approval. If you are on the approved list for critical infrastructure within a state, right, whether they be EPCs or architects or whatever, they can look at that and you can point to that and say, listen, this stuff safe enough to make a bridge span. It's safe
Mhm.
enough for your residential complex or what have you. Then the next thing is really just being proactive, whether it's with industry associations, whether with big companies, big EPCs, and what have you, and just sharing more information, more test results, more spec sheets, more case studies. For example, I mentioned earlier, but a big effort that I and we've been making recently is with companies that are building data centers and
Mhm.
saying, here's who we are. You probably don't know us, but you should. And you're probably actually using a lot of our materials, but you should be more thoughtful about that and maybe more proactive and use more. And here's how we can work together, et cetera, et cetera. So honestly, it's a lot of hand holding. And it starts, at least for us anyway, we're in a really good position because our traditional products have been in the market for decades and have been trusted for decades. And so when we bring in newer products, it's really just it's the iPhone 17, right? Oh, you like the iPhone 16, right? Well, here's the iPhone 17. It's a little bit better. It's a little bit more efficient. It's better environmentally, et cetera. But it's got all the same things that you're used to in the iPhone 16.
Are the data center companies looking for carbon credit opportunities? Can you write down certain costs because you can take a carbon credit against the fact that you used a low concrete car or low carbon concrete?
I can't say that I've necessarily heard of that. What I can say is that, often the folks that are developing the data centers are not the end users, right? They'll
No, they're
be
not. No.
there'll be some development company, but they will lease these to
Hmm.
Google, to Facebook or whomever.
Hmm.
And those folks, when they're in the process of doing that, leasing and providing that service, having that lower embedded emissions profile, I think is a real selling point, and hopefully is a way that they can make more money and provide perhaps a competitive advantage versus somebody else who hasn't done that. Additionally, there's cost benefits for our regular materials for the regular fly ash we manufacture. It's still usually 20 or 30% cheaper than just using cement. So there'll be cost savings for them as well. Just as there would be if you were building a road with our material.
Gosh, just competing on economic factors. No emotion. It really it strips away a lot of the passion people feel, and you just get down to this raw material that we're
Yep.
building almost all of society with. It changes your perspective on how we talk about this as making the business case for sustainability. It isn't even necessary based on the way you're describing it.
No, and then the other thing that people always seem to harp on, and people, and I get it because it's a niche space and the data is hard to come by, but I hear all the time, well, ash is running out, fly ash is running out. We've got to come up with other solutions. There's got to be new things we need to do.
Mhm.
And and my answer is that no, we're actually entering a new golden age of ash. We are, there's at least three big levers that are being pulled right now. One is a little counterintuitive. One is actually because of the Trump administration, coal plants are shutting a lot slower than they were, right? A lot of these utilities are pushing out, and a lot of this is driven by power demand and AI. They're pushing out retirement. So fresh ash is not going away as quickly as people think it is. The harvesting, et cetera, that we're doing and others are doing, ramping up dramatically fast. It's going up 20, 30, 40% a year in production. And then you've got natural pozzolans as well that are in the mix. Are going to have so much ash, actually. Folks, we don't need to reinvent the wheel here. There's people with cool technologies that are making SCMs out of interesting stuff, and I think wish them well, and I hope that's great. But the
Mhm.
nice thing is that we actually have cracked the code on how to make the materials we've already been using for decades even last even longer and produce even more so we can get to those higher replacement rates.
So where do you see the construction industry, and particularly in its use of concrete, in 5 years? Is it 100% more, 500% more? What's the pace of growth that we should be looking for?
So I think you'll see in ash, I think in the next 5 years, I think we should go from about a 15% replacement rate to about 20,
Mhm.
which is significant. So that's about a 33% increase. But where you'll see significant growth is in harvesting. So you're going to see last year, by my numbers, there were about 2 million tons a year of ash that was harvested from landfills. By the
Mm.
end of this decade, that'll be closer to 8 or 9 million tons a year. And so that is going to increase, close to fivefold. And that is going to be the biggest change in the industry vis-a-vis SCMs that I see. On the margin, you'll have some other changes as well. I think you'll have some more imports coming in, mostly of steel slag. So there'll be some more imports there. You'll have some new technologies that are coming out. A company called Terra CO2 is coming up with basically like a synthetic version of fly ash that
Yep.
they'll start with some production. But those are pretty small when you consider they're looking to build 100,000 ton a year facilities. And I'm talking about million ton a year facilities that are coming online for harvesting, et cetera. So I think you're going to see, like I said, a golden age in ash and SCMs, and it's really going to start kicking off in the next 5 years or so. In fact, I've been preaching this for a while. Somebody started listening about 4 months ago. McKinsey put a report out, and it was about the next decade in cement, and they said that the next decade in cement will be dominated by SCMs. So
Mhm.
hopefully people get, I even stumble over the word sometimes too, but get used to saying supplementary cementitious materials.
Uh, the rain in Spain falls mainly on the plain. Uh, it's almost the same. You look across the construction industry generally. Are there other areas you think there are opportunities for improvement? I mean, maybe not eco-material going after it, but what else should entrepreneurs be looking at as opportunities to lower the carbon intensity of our built environment?
Yes, absolutely. I think efficiency is really just is some of the lowest hanging fruit, right? Is making sure that, we're doing more with less. I think there's been a lot of efforts in that. Recycling of waste construction material, those are all helpful. But for me, I think the biggest issue that, yeah, putting aside critical infrastructure, which we need to reinvest in, and as always needs more investment, and AI and non-res. If we look at residential housing, that's the biggest issue I see for this
Mm.
country for the next 10 to 20 years, which is how do we have reasonably costed, sustainable, and good quality, resilient housing stock put in place? It's a super hard question, and it's a super one that's really, I think, more than any other issue in construction, hits the average American every day in their pocketbook, in their experience, which is I want to be able to afford a good quality home that I can live in and I can afford, and I don't have to worry about, floods and wildfires and hurricanes and all this sort of stuff that may be coming, may be exacerbated by things that are happening in the climate.
Mhm.
One answer to that, which has been on the come for a long time, is 3D printing of homes with greener material, and we're involved in that, and we supply a really high quality material to home 3D printing. And we actually this year we're breaking ground on what will be the largest project from a municipality's perspective in 3D home printing, where we'll be printing between 50 and 80 homes in the city of Houston. These will be
Mhm.
affordable homes. They'll start at about $200,000. They will be very high quality, 2,000, 2,500 square feet, and they'll really be cost efficient, and they'll be, really resilient. So it's stuff like that that I see and I think, wow, if we can get this right,
Yeah.
we can address that problem, which I really think is the number one thing that the average American worries about when they think about construction.
I think you're right. And we've been watching the 3D printed home, particularly concrete printed home, for several years with a lot of interest. Do you think is that a building methodology that is sufficiently distributed for this to happen rapidly, or is that the entrepreneurial opportunity to start a construction company around 3D printing?
I think that's the opportunity. I think technologically, people have had fits and starts,
Mm.
but I think it's been, to my mind, I've seen it proven that it can be done. How to do it at scale and efficiently is the real challenge because there's not
Yeah.
really anybody out there doing that right now. And we stand ready to help. We've been tailoring our recipes in some of our green cement projects to make it easier for these things to work and to make it cost efficient too, right? There's a price point at which it makes sense for someone to print a house out of concrete, and then there's a price point where it makes sense that doesn't make sense anymore, right? And
Yep.
so as an industry, if we want to make that happen, we've got to make sure that we control our costs efficiently so that it makes sense. And so, as far as the future goes, I'm optimistic. That said, the construction industry moves slowly, so it will take time.
Grant, it's always inspiring and pragmatic to talk to you. How can folks keep up on what you're doing?
Thanks, Mitch. I appreciate your time, and you have some great questions. Best way to do it is to follow me on LinkedIn, Grant Quasha, Quasha, or to check us out on ecomaterial.com. That's ECOMATERIAL.com.
Well, great. Thanks very much for spending time with us today, Grant. It's been fascinating.
Take care, Mitch. Thank you.
You've been listening to a conversation with Grant Quasha. He is CEO of Eco Material Technologies, about that company's low carbon pozzolanic concrete that was invented by the Romans, by the way. And that can be made out of industrial waste such as fly ash, allowing us to clean up even Superfund sites while building affordable homes. It's really something when you think about it. And you can learn more about eco-material technologies at ecomaterial.com. Eco-material is all one word, no space, no dash. And I think what we just heard is what sustainable business sounds like when it's made its case on purely economic terms. The growing focus on sustainability among businesses, who are often driven by their desire to please consumers who are overwhelmingly concerned about the environment, will be consolidated and become the norm as products like Ecomaterial Technologies concrete becomes widely available. When a material is cheaper, better, that's because pozzolanic concrete lasts longer than Portland cement. And also, that product checks the sustainability box. Adoption becomes a no-brainer decision. Grant's challenge may be getting supplies of fly ash closer to the 3,400 or so companies that make ready-mix concrete and the 96 locations that produce wet concrete for use in large-scale construction projects. What we're talking about is an incredibly local business, one that has only about 90 minutes or 300 revolutions of the mixer after water is added to the dry mix before it can no longer be used because the concrete has started to set and loses its ability to be worked. We have to get this done quick, and we have to get it done locally. The potential for low-income housing, for which Americans are in severe need due to a shortage of more than 7.1 million units of affordable housing, is potentially a vast opportunity to drive rapid adoption of low-carbon concrete. As Grant mentioned, eco-material concrete is being used to print homes in the Houston area. But think about the need for fire-resistant homes made of concrete in the urban wilderness interface, or, as we've recently learned, in the Los Angeles basin. Concrete printing systems can be rolled up to a home site and complete the production of a house in hours, saving labor time usually spent on framing, and that's just the start of the benefits. If you're thinking about starting a sustainable company, consider 3D concrete printed construction as a business. There are only 32 of these construction companies in the United States. That may be the entrepreneurial opportunity of the decade. I mean, imagine the demand for affordable, fast homes just in Los Angeles. So, what we've learned is business is just going on and sustainability is on the menu. We'll continue to track this topic. And if you're a 3D concrete printing company, drop me a line about talking with me on the show. Speaking of the show, would you take a moment to look at any of the more than 500 episodes of Sustainability in Your Ear that we produced and sharing them with your friends? Folks, by writing a review on your favorite podcast platform, you'll help your neighbors find us. You are the amplifiers that can spread more ideas to create less waste. Tell your friends, family, and coworkers, the people you meet on the street, that they can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, or any purveyor of podcast goodness that they prefer. Thank you so much for your support. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe. This is Sustainability in Your Ear, and we will be back with another innovator interview soon. In the meantime, folks, take care of yourself, take care of one another, and let's all take care of this beautiful planet of ours. Have a green day.